Yes, this is happy dance territory for the tourism industry, not just because of the people who'll come from New Zealand, but because it's the first step in things reopening.
Who benefits more, them or us?
Well, it's a really good question. I mean, until last year, New Zealand were our largest market. China pipped them at the post last year. I think that much of the traffic into the eastern states is usually visiting friends and family, so not a huge amount of impact for the tourism industry, except in Queensland. So New Zealanders love going to Queensland for a bit of sunshine, and I think the New Zealand Prime Minister actually mentioned that yesterday.
And do you think now the pressure will be on in some capacity, depending on what happens with COVID, to extend that to other places in the Pacific?
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt. The government has been very focused on this for some time. There was a plan put to them by the Australia-New Zealand Leadership Forum on how to open this bubble 5 or 6 months ago. It's been all about the timing. And I think there's a high level of keenness to think about places like Fiji and some other Pacific nations. But also, the Prime Minister was in Japan quite recently. I think that might be very high on his list too. Yeah,
I mean, the problem is if you do have any kind of a number of COVID cases out there and you do open up Fiji, the health situation isn't as good as other places, shall we put it that way, and it could be quite disastrous for a place such as Fiji if COVID were to basically run rampant.
Well, look, I'm sure that's part of the considerations here in terms of how this is going to be managed. Look, it's good news that we've now got the prospect of a vaccine. That will in some ways simplify things. But I think what's going to be a much more urgent priority is going to be fast, efficient, effective testing that allows us to reduce quarantine periods down to a day or so instead of the 14 days. That's going to make an enormous difference.
Do you think that would be doable? I mean, what's the point of a 1 day or 2 day quarantine?
Well, look, there are already tests that allow you to get those sorts of results quickly. It's just about volume and capacity, as it is with most things. It's a bit like, why can't we bring all Australians home? Well, it's about the quarantine bottleneck at this end in terms of having sufficient hotel rooms, et cetera, for the quarantine process. So if you can shorten that process, it also means that you can bring more people home.
The New Zealand travel bubble, what do you put the value at?
Oh, well, this is a multi-billion-dollar business between Australia and New Zealand. And remember, it's not just about leisure tourism. It's also about what goes backwards and forwards in the cargo of those planes, which is a very big deal. And in addition to that, it's about restoring business confidence between the two countries and being able to get that travel happening again. It's a whole multi-layered approach to everybody feeling a lot more confident, not just about taking a holiday.
Yeah, and would people be advised to kind of put the request, put their orders, book their tickets, etc. now?
Well, look, we know here in Australia that from the domestic tourism perspective, it's pretty hard to get bookings at the moment. I think that there's certainly a space for getting yourself organised. I think the New Zealanders have made it abundantly clear that barring any major outbreaks now, that this is a done deal in the first quarter. Just check your terms and conditions very carefully, though, just in case, in terms of refunds, etc.
The rest of the world must be looking on with envy at what we've got going on here.
Could not agree more, Peter. And I think this has some other interesting ramifications. From Australia's point of view, we need a whole range of skills in a whole range of industries, not least the tourism sector and the infrastructure and building sectors. There has never been a better time for us to be looking for skilled migration and people bringing their families here for the kind of jobs that we can't fill locally that are going to be very, very important to us in the next couple of years.
Yeah, well, the government's trying to do that, isn't it? They're trying to persuade people, and this was the campaign that Simon Birmingham launched last week, the campaign in New Zealand to try and get more Kiwis to apply for holiday visas to come out into regional areas in Australia and pick fruit, for example.
Exactly. That's one aspect of the exercise. But I think at the other end of the exercise, you've got infrastructure projects all around the country that governments are relying upon to generate a high turnover in the economy. The sort of highly skilled people you need to do that sort of work, we need a lot more of. This is a great opportunity to say to the world, where else would you like to be? Bring your family and your skills down here.